have a tax map?
You all got a tax map copy of the last month?
We did?
We did?
No, never seen it on
Tax
that.
I got one.
Never seen it on that.
Jeff, you gave one to me?
You gotta ask for it, I don't know.
Well, why doesn't the
what
rest of the council
discussion
get
was
that? I
gonna
mean, it's not my job to give it to the council.
be. I don't know what happened, Jeff. I mean, just one thing came in, the letter came in, and that was it.
Under the tax.
I'd say bring it up next, let's table it till next month, to see what it looks like on the map, et cetera, et cetera. And it's also,
You know what she did.
So council, now that you, the cat's out of the bag, you're more than welcome to talk to the tax assessor and find out what's fact and what's fiction here. And I'm sure he'll tell you the same thing, almost word for word, what I just said. It's council's decision to sell it with whatever you wanna sell it for. He has it assessed at a certain amount of money, and council can say, hey, we wanna sell for less, or we don't wanna sell it at all. Or we're gonna sell for only that price and that's it. The man made an offer, and I think it's a bona fide offer.
we'll take it up next month. It's $4,000. $4,000, right? For 9 lots at
No,
70?
400,
No,
period.
if it's the real price,
It's
it would be
400 per
96,
lot.
it's half of 9,600.
Well, it's 4 lots,
The
isn't
real
it?
assessed value is $9,600 is what the tax assessor said it is for the total batch of them.
Okay.
And what's he offering?
He's offering, I think the tax assessor said they're worth $800 a piece, but he offered $400 a piece. But it's the same deal with Gonzalez. They were several $100s per lot, but we sold them for $100.
Yeah, but we also come to the conclusion in the interim period that we weren't doing things very well then, and we need to be getting more money for the land that we're selling. And in fact, we've had one example of it whereby we got a whole lot more money than we thought we were gonna get.
So the reality
Last
is,
time around.
either we sell it, or we just simply hold on to it, and it's gonna be doing us a lot of good by just.
Well, we can put it up for auction. If we put it up for absolute auction and he puts up $400 a lot and that ends up being a high bid, then he owns it.
Mr. Solicitor, can you have prepared for the next meeting?
Well, I
proper
thought we
way
were
of how-
gonna-
Excuse me. The proper way of how this is supposed to be done.
Mr. Lafferty's told us that.
Yeah, I thought we
Yeah.
discussed this before, and
Right.
it was you put it up for auction, and you can have a minimum bid or no minimum bid, and it goes out for public notice.
Yeah, that, I think that analysis has already been done. What I can do is send copies over to clerks for distribution to members.
And please have a copy of the tax map, so the record see where Mr. Carmen's house is and the lots that he's proposing to person. They serve nobody no good whatsoever, other than him. It just simply increases the size of his property.
Well, then, I don't mean to sound flippant, I really don't, but it sounds as though this would be a great first candidate for us to do things that way because it's pretty much foregone, there aren't gonna be a lot of variables, and we'll get a taste for how it works.
It's fine, I'm okay, I'm in agreement with that.
Well, let's do it that way at the next meeting. Because,
So on next meeting, under old business, we're gonna have
the same thing.
sale of land.
Yeah, same thing.
But we're gonna discuss putting it up for auction.
Yeah.
So does that have to be advertised then, Mr. Solicitor?
Well,
Does it have to
yeah.
be certain parcels of land are gonna be auctioned off that night?
Yeah, well,
Well, no, they're not being auctioned off that
Yeah,
night.
the auction wouldn't happen. First, you would have to act to authorize them to be sold through auction. And then set a date for that, terms of the sale, or terms decided in the vote. And then the auction happens after that.
Can I say something? In the past, what it has always been said is that if it's contiguous owner and there is no other person, whether it was a classic example of the Route 50 parcel, there was no other person, and he was the sole person who was interested in buying.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the alternative methods to an auction. If you have a parcel of land in the parcels, which are not developable as of right under your zoning, you can offer them for sale to the contiguous owners. And then you basically have a mini auction, if you will, between just the people who own the contiguous lands.
So it's not any old Tom, Dick, or Harry that's gonna jump in on this auction, it's just only gonna be to the contiguous landowners, and I believe to the best of my knowledge, he's the only contiguous landowner.
That may be the case, and assuming for our purposes that these parcels are not developable in Rubber.
None else.
And also Well, it's on more than one that collectively, they're not situated in such a way that they can be aggregated in something to create a lot.
Moving on down the line, that'll be on the agenda for next month. There's a motion to approve a raffle license for the Home School Association. I don't have any paperwork on that, but I'm not opposed to whatever they want to do. The Home School Association, they need to raise money, so I will make the necessary motion to approve for them to have the raffle license be issued. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'd like to know what the money's gonna be used for.
This came in, this afternoon, and I wasn't familiar with the raffle license. I called another clerk who said that my motion can do it by resolution. The motion is fine to approve a raffle license. They filled out the state required paperwork. They want to raffle off a fire pit device. And there's a fee that I said that some towns waive, which I think it's either a $20 or $40 fee, depending on whether they're gonna have it at one night or one day, or it's gonna be a continuing raffle license up to a certain point. Sometimes that's how raffles work. But whatever that fee is, it could go up to $40 they would have to pay us. In the past, I believe that we would waive that fee because it's home school organization. So I did want to pull you for that, just to make sure I don't have that authority
I
to do
think
that.
that would be the
right thing to do.
right thing to do
Right.
without doubt. There's no reason that
Right,
the city's gonna prosper or plunder because of $40.
right. So it appears that all their paperwork is in order and they've done this before. So it's just a formality that I want you guys to know that I could do this.
I'll
You know,
second the motion.
Mrs. Sparks, I apologize, I don't know what they're gonna do with the money, but I would assume it's gonna be for the purposes of the kids. Some kind of a program.
Just, general purposes,
There's a motion and a second. I think we need to do a roll call for this one here, which is also correct, for raffle.
Mr. Dilge,
Yes.
Ms. Owen,
One thing, if we are going to ask to find out what they're doing with their money, we need to make that across the board.
I'm
Because
just
there's-
saying what I was thinking is that they would say something like, we're trying to raise money for a school trip or
Right.
something. Like, I would just think that would be formality.
There's sometimes we ask and then we don't ask, so we need to make it across the board.
I didn't see anything in the application where they're required to say what it's for, but
I'm against it.
I truly trust that what the school's doing with the money, it's gonna be done for the proper purposes.
No, I don't even want, I'm not.
Okay, we
That's
are
not my
actually in
point.
a roll call vote. We shouldn't be having discussion any further.
okay, so Ms. Owen,
My answer is yes.
Ms. Sparks,
Yes.
Ms. Masker,
Yes.
Mayor Vanessa.
Yes.
And Mayor, you always give reasons why you vote one way or another when you vote, so that's what I was doing too.
Not always, but sometimes.
Are we going into closed?
Yes.
Do you wanna do public before we go into
Yes.
closed?
Second.
Make a motion, open the meeting to the public.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mrs. Olson?
Okay, Jeannie Olson, 164 7th Avenue East. Just a couple questions. I work for a school district, and anytime my position's being discussed, I'm to be sent a rice notice. And there were an awful lot of positions and things being discussed here, including the zoning officer, and I just wanna know, were all these people issued rice notices?
No?
Well, if I may respond, not every action that touches tangentially on an employee requires a rights notice. The rights notice is needed when a governing body plans to take or may take action that could have a detrimental impact on a person's employee's rights. That can be either an existing employee or a prospective employee.
Right, so they could be present also, right?
Well,
Or,
Yeah, they have the option when that happens to ask that any discussions that happen in public session rather than private. That's basically the extent of what they
okay,
can
I
do.
just wanted to clarify that. And the other thing is, I, as a member of the zoning board, it's been months since Rachel's received, well, I don't want to speak on her account, since I've received a zoning officer's report. we don't get them anymore, and they used to be part of our packet every month. How can we act as a board and approve things or disapprove things if we're not seeing anything that's happening? Isn't that our job, isn't that our, purpose?
So that's probably a function of distribution that.
Well,
Mr.
it
Moore,
needs to happen, if it's not been happening, it needs to
How come they
happen
don't get the
again.
report?
I wasn't aware of it, so I can pass that on. I think it's just a matter of just knowing what to do. Rachel's new, I came
Well,
in
we
at
did
the tail end
discuss
of the year and.
In all fairness, I brought it up at the planning board meeting last month, and
Right.
Wayne said that he forwarded them to you,
gives them to
and
me.
you're supposed to give them to Rachel.
I wasn't
So,
aware, I wasn't
okay,
aware of
well,
that, I thought it was just the
miscommunication.
council.
So if we could just get them from the office,
Yeah.
that
Quite
would
honestly,
be great.
Zoning officer is supposed to give it to the secretary.
Yes,
It
but
shouldn't be
he was,
passed from one to the next. It should
well, I don't know, he said he
simpler
always
just
gave
for
them
him
to the clerk.
to give them to the secretary. No reason to give it to Judd, for him to have to give it to the secretary. That's duplicating the work.
But
All right, well-
when Wayne
I can
emails
send
it
it-
to me,
As long as I get one, I don't
Right.
care, who gives it to who, okay?
when Wayne emails it, I ask him to email it to Rachel too, so that way it goes directly to them.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
That's okay, and speaking of clerks, no offense, we need to hire a clerk, this is ridiculous. The website is not updated, it hasn't been updated forever. Tonight's meeting wasn't even on there, the agenda last month wasn't on there. Nothing's getting done in this town, except bickering, fighting, unprofessionalism. It's really an embarrassment to the whole town. And as far as the cannabis ordinance, as also a member of the zoning board, which we twice discussed it, the second time was voted 3-2 against the ordinance, was reported wrong to city council at the meeting last month. And I feel the residents of Estell Manor were not heard. It was swept under the rug, it was hush-hush, there wasn't the public hearing that we should have had, and I agree with that, Mr. Goodman, that it should have gone out as a robocall. We should have had people here for a public hearing. You cannot act for the citizens of Estell Manor, just like with the Second Amendment thing. 30 signatures, whoopee-doo. Talk to the people in Estell Manor, see how they feel, have a public hearing, call people up. That's all I want to say, thank you.
Fine, Mrs. Wilson. Mrs. Garrett.
What did you decide on, the property for, what's his name? Carmine. Were you having an auction? Okay, or,
It's been tabled till next month,
Oh,
in
you
which we're gonna
tabled it.
dispose of it properly, according to the most legal way it ought to be done. Apparently,
I
we've been
mean, why
doing it wrong.
not just sell it to him? He wants it, are people standing in line to buy those lots? No?
There's nobody that it could benefit from it other than him. He's the only contiguous landowner to it.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
sell
simple.
it to him. It's common sense, just sell it to him. Why go through all this and, and then you're gonna have an auction, and who's gonna be there? Him. And he's gonna buy it anyway, and you're gonna have to advertise it, you're gonna have to, just sell it to him. What?
I think he actually made far more than a fair offer for it. We've sold numerous lots for $100 to other people, and he's willing to give $400.
And he's lived there forever.
Yep.
He's lived there forever.
I have no issue with it, Mrs. Garrett. You have no argument with me on that. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Cassidy?
Cassie, man, I forgot the other thing, 111 Head of the River Road. To the Second Amendment, I really respect this nice lady's efforts because she really cares about what she's saying. And what she said made a lot of sense. I think the citizens need to see the resolution that you're going to pass. It could be put on the website. It really needs to be clearly stated if you decide to agree to it, what you're agreeing to. Just to say, if you just all pass a resolution, we, the citizens, don't know what you're actually passing. It could meet the criterion that I read as the definition, or it could be what this nice lady's saying, it's just a nice thing to support legal gun owners. So I personally really want to see that resolution before you pass it, and I think all the citizens of Estell Manor deserve. To Mrs. Olson's point about this website, I couldn't believe it. I had to call someone to ask if there was really a meeting tonight, because there was no evidence that there was a meeting. And I respect what Mr. Moore is doing so much. However, I heard you talking about deputy clerks and clerk typists, and I heard last month that we don't have a personnel committee, it's just the mayor. So what the heck is going on? Why don't we have a city clerk? And some of these things that Mr. Moore's learning as he goes along, you need someone that's their training and that's their job. And I'm really getting very frustrated with the lack of communication to our citizens, that there's nothing on our website. If you're still talking about the dog license in March, the wonderful vaccination clinic, it's on there about that it's going to happen, but so now it should be there immediately that it's going to have another one. It's all of these things, someone needs to do it, and you are responsible, and I don't know why the mayor hasn't done it, but all 5 of you need to get this thing done and get us a city clerk, a competent, full-time, again I say full-time, because you have no idea what it entails, and get this done. It's just inexcusable how the city's being run.
I don't know if you've checked around with other municipalities how much they pay a clerk, but I know for Buna, the clerk gets $80,000 and has 2 deputy clerks, and they do all the work. You complained about having a full-time clerk, you need a full-time clerk, and there was something about insurance was too much. Years ago, we had a clerk, and when she retired, her insurance was paid until the day she died, and she did not die the day after she retired. The city paid her health insurance until she died. So there's all kind of things that you can do. And you need a full-time clerk, just simple things. Somebody should be keeping track of who dies in town. Because somebody mentions to you that somebody died, you know, I didn't know that. They have a registrar, you keep an accounting of who died, and you should keep marriages and births and all that kind of stuff too. You don't get the newspaper. You put ordinances in the newspaper, and you can't even have a newspaper to look at to see if that's what you wanted to have put in. Because the city doesn't get a newspaper, because you think you're going to save money. There's a lot of things that a clerk does that's not visible to a lot of people. It is a full-time job, and you really need a full-time clerk.
I'd like to say something in response, if I may, in an appreciation to Mrs. Seelman. Mrs. Seelman, though she no longer works in the office, she stayed on as our registrar and does all that marriage, and
Yeah.
that's, forgive me for not framing it better, not understanding the responsibility better. We should remain very grateful to her for doing it. She does the same
Yeah.
fine job she did before.
Yeah.
And so we're not missing that piece of the clerk's office obligation. It is being done, and being done very well by Mrs. Seelman.
Good.
We're lucky that she's a hometown girl and wants to do well by us.
Yeah. Never should have been let go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was some earlier discussion regarding legal contracts. I would strongly recommend, rather than relying on unreliable narration, because sometimes we find out that what is thought to be so just ain't so. Take a look at what, in fact, the contracts have said, because this whole discussion has gone on for a long time. Because one person has wanted to make various changes from time to time because they were unhappy with the previous person. And then, unfortunately, the new person winds up making them unhappy too. And so we go through the same toxic cycle. And then it's, oh, well, that's all supposed to have been that way. Turns out, I think you will find that the contracts don't quite read the way they're being reported from the
Are you talking about the
decks.
solicitor's agreement? I'm not sure what you're, okay, thank you. I wasn't sure what you're talking about.
That's the first part.
Thank you.
So get those contracts, take a look, go from there. Of course, the other side of the coin is, if in fact there is no executed contract, then someone should never be paid. Because that would resolve the question of, is there a contract and what in fact has been agreed to in writing as those terms and conditions. But if there is no written contract, and that was never signed, then why was the nomination made in January to begin with? Because there's no contract in front of you. Or there is one, but we're just not one to admit to what actually was in it. Or some things were stated verbally, but they never actually made it in writing, and so we rely again on the unreliable memories. Because for some, unfortunately, we want to remember what we want to remember, and we don't want to necessarily operate in consensus reality. And that's difficult.
Mr. DeLucre.
Well, I don't want to put Rick on the spot. He just,
No, I don't ask him a question.
the poor guy just came in tonight. We might want him to come back again.
We don't write the contract for you, you write it for us. Does your retainer agreement under these circumstances typically automatically renew and held over at the same, under the same terms for another year unless
Yeah.
it's stipulated that it should change?
Yeah,
So there was
typically-
language in it already that says unless it's interrupted, it continues for another year.
Not having with the contract.
If it's your typical contract.
Yeah, typically, when you're working for a governmental agency where there's an annual appointment rather than a non-governmental client, you'll have a provision in there that will say, basically, you continue to serve both at the pleasure of the client and until a successor is made.
Automatic renewal for us,
Yeah.
effectively. So you're under contract, probably.
I would say, based on everything I know,
Thank you.
notwithstanding Mr. Coe's radical comments about being lawyer.
If I was at all professionally disrespectful, Mr. DeLuca, you know I did not intend for it to be taken that way. But finally, going back to the multiple points regarding clerk, just to be very blunt, we've gotten to this point because one person wound up being obsessed. I'm sorry, but that is the truth, whether you want to admit to it or not, Mrs. Olson. I tried to agree at the beginning of the meeting. I'm being interrupted, Joseph.
We're not gonna address each other with
Well,
derogatory remarks.
then gavel that down.
I'm gaveling you both out. You're not gonna make derogatory remarks.
I didn't say anything derogatory about her. However, there was one person who was obsessed with getting rid of our former clerk and was willing to say and do whatever they felt was necessary to do it. And promised all of you, or your predecessors, this master, that it would be easy to find someone who would be so much better, so much more qualified, and cost a whole lot less. And again, with no offense to Mr. Moore, because he did not sign on for any of that, that effort has been an utter and complete failure. And that's not because of COVID. And so I would simply submit to you that as far as in Christianity, one of the things we're taught about is restorative justice. And I would imagine there are paths to take to restore status quo ante. That may result in the eating of some crow. That may result in some needs for apologies. But there are times to put the betterment of the city above, and I realize, again, it comes back to the appointment power of one person. And so if that winds up being a January issue, then so be it. But unless you have some other plan in place, then you need to look at those radical steps to fix the situation that has been created, or at least make it public that that is why the situation exists. Because otherwise, it is going to continue with this. And who are you going to get who's going to want to come in and deal with that? Other than, unfortunately, the local people that we've managed to, out of the goodness of their hearts, and managed to do it for quite a while. Thank you.
As it relates to these lots that you're considering selling, do we, the seller, have to be concerned with the selling having a clear title on those, or is it the buyer's responsibility to be concerned about it? Are we
Entirely on the buyer.
entirely the buyer,
We sell them.
as is?
Yeah, whatever title we have, whatever
Okay.
condition of property.
I want to make that correct. Clear.
Those properties went in
Never had to take out title insurance, that's up to them. Mr. Goslin?
Thank you, Larry Gosson, 152 Fifth Avenue. I can only amplify my own concern about the problems here in the city as it relates indeed to the clerk's office. And I don't mean this personally to Mr. Moore, but it's obvious to me that there are serious problems. I saw the same things with the website, no updates, no nothing. Planning board, the information coming out, and I heard over and over again here tonight, as even you yourself, the council, has struggled with not getting the necessary information out of the clerk's office for different reports that only received today. I watched some of you say, well, I don't even have it. Every time a report got mentioned, you looked at each other, you got it, you got it, you got it. So something's wrong. That's got to get fixed. As it relates to the discussion relative to the salary ordinance, he really didn't pay much attention to all of that except for one area, and I will speak to our housing officer and the position. Not so much actually to the salary that you're paying him, as long as you're paying him, but I have long advocated that we should not have this position at all. It is an opening for liability. Every time our housing officer goes out and inspects a property, he gives that future homeowner a piece of paper that says this property has been inspected for safety, for plumbing, for electrical, for sanitary issues. Meaning a sanitary, that's a septic system. We haven't bought anybody a septic system yet because Mr. Collins has approved their sanitary system. But there's going to come a day when some real estate purchaser, and he's going to get his lawyer, and his lawyer's going to sue everybody in sight. I retired, they ain't getting me. But they're going to sue everybody in sight, and they're going to sue the city for a new septic system because our housing officer approved the sanitary system, said the sanitary system works, and then they find out that it doesn't. We're going to get sued over this. Hamilton Township does not have a CO ordinance. They have a fire officer goes out and checks a fire a smoke detector. Of course, we do that through the state. Our own housing officer doesn't do the fire inspection, a member of the fire company doesn't do the fire inspection. We do a CO, only setting ourselves up for future liability. Egg Harbor Township does not do a CO ordinance. They have a fire ordinance. And these are communities that have rental housing in them, that have all kinds of different issues relative to the housing. I suggest to you, a buyer has looked at the property, a seller has looked at the property, a mortgage company's appraiser has looked at the property. There are so many people that have looked at the property that have an interest in that piece of real estate. We do not belong in that business. Notwithstanding that, Mr. Collins has always done a wonderful job, and he really was always very pleasant for me to work with over the years. But each and every time we did it, I told him he shouldn't be there, he shouldn't be in the business. We shouldn't be in the business. Enough on that. I fully support council's position to restrict cannabis business in town until we learn any more, since that discussion seems to continue on. As it relates to the Second Amendment, you all swore in your oath to support the Constitution. You support the Second Amendment. You support the Constitution. There's nothing further that needs to be said here about that. As far as that's my position or view of that, you can add my name to the other third. Election day is coming. I am very, very concerned that we have a safe and fair election in our city coming up. It's going to be acutely important. I was shocked to walk into this room on primary day to see that our election was actually being run by none other than the Army. Oh yeah, the National Guard sat here in our election polling place. Our election workers were National Guard